As I sat on our worn-out couch, my daughter curled up beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, I could feel the weight of a secret pressing against my chest like a leaden anchor, an internal struggle I had been wrestling with since the day she was born. My name is Robert, but to her, I was simply Dad, the steadfast figure of her life, the one who cheered her on every time she took her first steps, celebrated every birthday with homemade cakes, and consoled her after heartbreaks at school. You see, I am not her biological father. I was thrust into the role when my partner, Lila, found herself pregnant after a whirlwind romance with her high school sweetheart, a man who chose to disappear into the ether when she needed him the most. In the beginning, Lila had told me about her estranged relationship with the father, and though it initially felt like a burden, I found unexpected joy in becoming a father figure to little Emma. Each day with her forged an unbreakable bond that transcended blood. Yet, as she grew, so did my fears. Every giggle we shared, every bedtime story I read, felt like sand slipping through my fingers, and the question lingered in the back of my mind: when would I have to tell her the truth? The topic weighed heavily on me, especially as Emma reached her 7th birthday, an age where the innocence of childhood ebbs away, and the world outside begins to weave its intricate web of complexities. I couldn't shake off the feeling that she deserved to know who she truly was, yet the thought of shattering her perception of what a daddy meant terrified me. One evening, while we were making homemade pizza together in the kitchen, Emma's curiosity bloomed like the dough we needed. "Dad," she asked, looking up at me with those big, innocent eyes, "why don't I look like you?" I paused, my hands momentarily frozen in motion, as countless thoughts crashed into one another. Here was my moment, the delicate thread weaving together my fears and hopes. Ignoring the knot tightening in my stomach, I chuckled nervously. "Well, honey, we're all unique, right? Like how pizza can have different toppings but still be delicious." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, but I didn't miss the glimpse of a frown crossing her tiny face, the beginnings of doubts creeping in. That night, I sprawled on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of my decision cascading over me like a heavy blanket. The idea of eventually telling her felt unbearable, yet living with the knowledge that I had kept such a monumental truth from her was gnawing at me, a constant hum in the back of my mind. Days turned into weeks, and I felt the anxiety swell within me like an untamed tide, unsure of how to navigate this emotional sea. I found myself lying awake late into the night, watching as Lila slept beside me, blissfully unaware of my spiraling thoughts. I had made a promise to myself to protect Emma, to give her the happiness she deserved, but was I building her a castle on top of a fragile foundation, one that could crumble with the mere whisper of my truth? Her birthday approached, and with it, my urgency to make a choice. I decided to consult an online forum for advice, a collective of voices that could guide me through my turbulent thoughts. The responses were varied. Some suggested absolute honesty, while others urged caution, reminding me that childhood was a fleeting moment best preserved without complicating truths. The most heartfelt message came from someone who spoke of how being a father isn't defined by blood but by love and dedication, and suddenly, I felt a flicker of clarity. Finally, on a warm evening in late spring, I gathered the courage I had been seeking. I knelt down beside Emma as she played with her toys, her laughter filling the room with warmth. "Sweetie," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "can we talk for a moment?" Emma looked up, the excitement in her gaze faltering, sensing the gravity of the moment. I took a deep breath and opened my heart to her, sharing the truth about her parentage in the gentlest way possible, aware that I was walking on thinnest ice. As I spoke, I could see her processing the information, her expression a canvas of emotions, confusion, hurt, curiosity, all washing over her. What struck me was the moment her brow unfurled, replaced by a contemplative gaze. "So, you're still my dad, though, right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and in that instant, the anxiety that had been swelling within me began to drain away. I nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace, reassuring her that while the way we had formed our family was different, my love for her had never wavered. In the days that followed, I learned that the bond we shared was resilient enough to withstand the storm of truth. Emma showed an incredible maturity for her age, occasionally asking questions that revealed both a depth of understanding and a deep need for reassurance. I marveled at how she processed this new information, and much to my relief, the love between us blossomed even more. But more importantly, I felt a profound sense of relief myself. The secret no longer loomed like a specter in the corners of our lives, and the soil of our family was enriched with the truth, creating space for even deeper connections. And as I navigated this new phase of our relationship, I realized that honesty didn't shatter the beautiful illusion of our family, it fortified it. I reflected often on how much I had wrestled with that dilemma, and yet, in the end, being honest with her allowed me to see the purity of love that transcends DNA. Update: several months later, as I glanced through my phone one evening, I came across an old message from the forum where I had sought advice. Surprisingly, I discovered replies to my post, people from all corners of the world sharing their own tales of blended families and truths. It was then I realized our story wasn't unique at all, so many had tread this path before me and emerged not just intact but bonded. The comforting notion washed over me that family is often forged not merely by blood but through the shared experiences, love, and resilience that we cultivate together. I leaned back into the cozy embrace of the moment, knowing that, come what may, my daughter would never question whether she belonged. She was my light, and I was her dad, forever intertwined in a tapestry of love and understanding. As I gazed at the flickering candlelight, casting comforting shadows around the room, the weight of the secret I had carried for so long began to feel both heavier and lighter at the same time. While I had crafted a life full of laughter, adventure, and love with my daughter, Amy, the thread of truth tugged at my heart. The day I received the news about my partner's unexpected pregnancy and the true nature of our relationship was one of those moments that forever redefined my perspective on family. I was not biologically linked to Amy, a fact that often lingered at the back of my mind like a faint whisper, reminding me that I was an outsider to a world I had willingly entered. Yet, as the years passed, it became increasingly clear that blood did not define my role. The myriad of bedtime stories, scraped-knee band-aids, and heartfelt conversations about her day did. Resigned to the notion that revealing this truth could shatter the innocence of our bubble, I made the choice to keep my silence, to protect her joy and the sanctuary we had built together. But as she grew more curious about her origins, her questions began to feel like gentle nudges toward a truth I couldn't continue to evade forever. They were innocent at first, simple inquiries about her features and why she looked different from me, questions that caught me off guard and sent a shiver of unease down my spine. I watched her brilliant smile fade to that of uncertainty as she probed further into her identity, and each question felt like a pressure cooker building inside my chest. I could feel the responsibility of my role as her father shift under that weight, and I was torn between my urge to cuddle her close in reassurance and the gnawing doubt of whether my silence was truly in her best interest. One evening, after reading her a story about a little girl who was brave enough to embrace her roots, Amy turned to me, her big brown eyes glistening with curiosity. "Daddy, what if we all have something special about us? What if I'm not like you?" The question caught in my throat, and I found myself caught off guard. It was as if the very universe conspired to push this secret to the forefront of our lives. Unbeknownst to me, she had been contemplating the same questions that had clouded my mind. My heart raced, realizing that the moment of truth was approaching, and I had to find a way to navigate this delicate discussion. Drawing a deep breath, I sat down with her, and in that serene space between us, I carefully crafted my words, remembering how important it was to share the love we had built over the years. "Amy," I started slowly, "you were brought into this world in the most special way, and no matter how you came to be in our family, you will always be my daughter." The way she tilted her head in slight confusion tugged at my heart. I knew I had to explain further. With each passing moment, I unraveled the layers of my past, speaking of her biological father with kindness and care, making sure she understood that a father's love is not defined merely by genetics but by actions, choices, and unwavering dedication. It was delicate, like weaving a fragile tapestry of understanding, and as I watched the pieces of her understanding shift and settle, I felt both relief and anxiety in equal measure. Her brow furrowed in contemplation, and for a moment, I held my breath, fearing what might come next. Would she feel betrayed? Alone? But as that moment stretched, the dawning recognition washed over her features, a softening in her expression, as if she had been let in on a beautiful secret. "So, my real dad is out there?" she asked, a bit of wonder coloring her tone. I nodded gently. "He is there, but it's the love I have for you every day that makes me your dad, too." It might have been a small part of our journey, but as she absorbed it all, I saw the shadows in her eyes lift as understanding graced her features. She wrapped her arms tightly around me, and in that embrace, I felt the burden lift, realizing that honesty had brought us even closer. A few weeks later, I found us sharing ice cream on a warm summer evening, laughter spilling into the air like confetti. Amid playful bites of rainbow sprinkles, Amy suddenly said with a thoughtful pout, "You know what, Daddy? It doesn't matter where I come from. I have you, and that's all that matters." My heart swelled with warmth, a familiar comfort wrapping around me as I leaned in to kiss her forehead. With her candid heart and fierce spirit, she had shown me that love truly transcends all obstacles. As we sat, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a blaze of fiery colors, I felt grateful for that moment, blessed to walk this path with her by my side, knowing we would continue to weave our experiences into a beautiful tapestry for years to come. Each day would bring its challenges, perhaps even more questions about who she was and where she came from, but I realized now that we would face them together, hand in hand, and with an eye for the love we cultivated over a lifetime. Family was not defined solely by heritage, it was the dance of trust and understanding we shared, the bridge of love spanning the depths of our differences, creating an unbreakable bond stronger than any DNA. With that notion held firmly in my heart, I returned to the present moment, feeling the warmth of our journey flow through me, shaping our narrative as something beautiful, something we could cherish forever. In that serene moment, I could almost hear the whispers of our future echoing in the soft, cozy corner of the living room where we often spent our evenings together. The flickering light from the fireplace cast gentle shadows against the walls, and I smiled as I watched my daughter, Lily, sprawled out on the floor with her vibrant coloring book, her brow furrowed in concentration as she selected the perfect shade of blue for the ocean she was creating. There was something enchanting about the way her imagination flowed free, the carefree nature of childhood radiating from her every brushstroke. As I caught a glimpse of her focused determination, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had come since those tentative days after her mother and I had decided to marry. Admitting the truth about my relationship to Lily felt daunting, even now. The fear of shattering the world she thought she knew, filled with unconditional love and security, lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake off. But looking at her, my heart swelled with a sense of duty. I wanted her to feel the freedom to embrace her whole story, even with the complexity that it carried. It wasn't just about what she thought her origins were, it was about empowering her to see that who she was a beautiful mosaic of experiences, love, and tender moments shared with those who cared about her deeply. Days turned into weeks, and life continued to unravel its ordinary and extraordinary moments. We shared laughter over pancake breakfasts, cozy movie nights where we huddled under blankets, and simple days filled with the sweet aroma of grass and sunshine as we explored local parks. Yet in those delightful everyday encounters, the unspoken truth loomed like a soft veil, reminding me of the delicate balance between the worlds we inhabited, the one of fairy tales and the one of reality. Each evening, as we tucked ourselves into bed, I found myself weighing the power of honesty against the comfort of fiction. Could the truth truly coexist with her innocent understanding of life? I never wanted to be the one to fracture the lens through which she viewed her little universe. As I watched her drift off to sleep, curled up with her favorite plush toy, all I could think was how much I wanted to shield her from any possible hurt. Then came the day that shifted everything. I was sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone while waiting for Lily to return from school, when an email from her teacher flashed on screen. At first, I felt my heart race in alarm as I read the subject line, Family Tree Project. Lily had mentioned it a few days prior, her eyes sparkling with the excitement of creativity and knowledge, but all at once, a knot formed in my stomach. The assignment asked the children to bring in a family tree detailing their lineage, including pictures and stories about their ancestry. For a quick second, I considered reaching out to the teacher, confessing my circumstances, but the thought of drawing even more attention to our non-traditional family sent my anxiety skyrocketing. If this was a test of her knowledge of who she belonged to, would Lily's heart break realizing I wasn't who she thought I was? When she bounded through the door later that afternoon, I held my breath, forcing an encouraging smile. "Hey, sweetheart. How was school today?" I asked, knowing I was stepping into the unknown. Her face lit with delight at the mention of her project as she began recounting each detail, her enthusiasm contagious. The colors, the stickers, the stories she'd heard about her grandparents, it all poured from her lips like a warm stream. It was during those moments that I felt the weight of my secret pressing down on me, filling me with a mix of admiration and unease. As she unfolded her plans for the family tree, it dawned upon me that I would have to navigate this delicate situation with grace and thoughtfulness. As we sat together, Lily busily cutting out images to represent the various family members she would include, I found my heart racing. I knew I couldn't put off the inevitable much longer. But as I watched her sigh after completing her art project, a soft smile gracing her face, I realized she was so incredibly proud of what she was creating. Instead of rushing toward that uncomfortable confrontation, I felt compelled to help her frame the narrative. "You know, Lily," I began gently, "family can be made up of many different branches and roots. Although some families look like a super elaborate tree, others might be more like a patchwork quilt of love. She looked up at me with her big, curious eyes, prompting me to continue. What if we made this tree reflect all the people in your life who matter, those who love you just the way you are? It could be really special to include me, your mom, your grandparents, and anyone else you adore. As she pondered my words, a flicker of realization seemed to dance in her gaze, her creativity evidently igniting a deeper understanding of what family truly means. Can I put stickers for my favorite friends? She asked brightly, and I couldn't help but chuckle, a wave of relief washing over me as I saw her spirit flourish. It felt like a small victory. Perhaps this was my child's first step toward embracing a broader definition of family. Embracing that ambiguity would give her strength and resilience in navigating this winding path. By the time the project was finished, I realized that I, too, had begun to rewrite my own story. As she proudly displayed the completed family tree artwork on the fridge, a beautiful representation of our unconventional yet profound connection, I felt the weight of my fear slowly evaporate, replaced with warmth and positivity. Our past would forever remain part of us, but love was the true anchor for our future. And as I tucked her into bed that night, I whispered the words I had nearly forgotten to say. You are my heart, Lily. Always. In her sleepy eyes, I finally saw the reflection of trust. The weight of my challenge hadn't vanished, but I sensed the worry for the future, if only momentarily, felt lighter as I closed the door, heart full with a deep hope. Now, it seemed our intertwined tapestry would only continue to grow richer and more beautiful in the moments that followed. Confession, I gave head to a freaking banana. Yes, you read that right, and before you jump to conclusions about my sanity, let me explain. I'm just an average 20-something living in a small town, working at a local grocery store, and spiraling into a mild existential crisis as I try to figure out life and relationships. I've always had a quirky sense of humor, but my friends would often joke that my romantic life was just as ripe for comedy as it was for disaster. My last relationship had ended in a particularly awkward way. He had decided he needed space, only to backtrack and unceremoniously announce he was now dating someone who he claimed was better suited for him. I didn't have the heart to tell him that meant the end of my nights spent watching terrible reality TV and my weekends filled with the silence of loneliness. So, in my state of mild despair, I decided to throw a little party for myself. I bought a few bottles of wine, some snacks, and yes, a bunch of bananas. I sat on the couch, watching my favorite movies while indulging in a few glasses. As the evening wore on, the combination of a couple of glasses of wine and my ever-present bad sense of humor led to an unusual thought. Wouldn't it be funny to recreate a famous scene from a movie using just a banana? There I was, giggling to myself, holding the banana in one hand, and promptly made a comment about giving head to the banana, laughing hysterically at my own lack of dignity. My mind was buzzing with the absurdity of it all, but as I leaned in to take a ridiculously dramatic bite, inspiration struck. What if I turned it into a performance? It felt ridiculous but sort of liberating. Why not poke fun at my love life and the angst that seemed to follow me like a bad smell? I set my phone on a nearby shelf, hit record, and proceeded to give the banana a show. I don't know what possessed me, perhaps it was the wine or the need to embrace the absurdity of life, but I made a point to give that banana a moment to shine. I twirled and laughed, exaggerating every move until I lost myself in the charade, winking at the camera and pretending the banana was the sweetest lover I'd ever had. So there I was, full of self-derision and ridiculousness, recording myself in what I now refer to as the banana incident. A few friends got a hold of the video, and to my astonishment, it turned into a mini-viral sensation among a tight-knit group of social media friends. What had started as a moment of deep sadness turned into something quite remarkable. It pulled me back from the brink of feeling sorry for myself and showed me that laughter, even at my own expense, was a gift I'd forgotten I possessed. Weeks went by, and I began to embrace my sense of humor in ways I never thought possible, sharing my journey through life and heartbreak in an unapologetic light. I connected with new people online, all drawn to my newfound candor and kooky content. Perhaps life didn't need to be so serious. Just when I thought I was done with the banana saga, I got an unexpected message. It was from an old college friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His messages were lighthearted and full of laughter, recalling the outrageous things we did back in our carefree days. It led to a few exchanges back and forth, and the connection felt different, deeper somehow. We agreed to meet up, and to my surprise, I found myself excited, because he had seen the infamous banana video and thought it was the most hilarious thing he'd ever witnessed. When we met, it was awkward but charming in a way that felt warm. We talked, We laughed, and as the evening wore on, I realized that this was the first time I truly felt connected to someone since that terrible breakup. So, you see, giving head to a banana wasn't just a ridiculous act of drunken escapism, it was a turning point that led me to rediscover laughter, rekindle friendships, and embrace the beauty of the absurd in life. Sometimes, you have to let go of everything, even your dignity, to find joy and connection. In retrospect, my confession isn't about the banana, it's about how taking a moment to explore the ridiculousness we often shy away from can lead us down enchanting, unexpected paths. Update: a month later, that college friend and I decided to take things to the next level. We're officially dating. And yes, we've shared a few more crazy moments that involve fruits and laughter, which have solidified our bond even more. Life can be so wonderfully absurd, and honestly, I can't wait to see where this new adventure takes us, knowing that sometimes the most ridiculous confessions can lead to the greatest joys. As I sit down to reflect on the whirlwind of my life since that fateful day, a gentle smile creeps across my face, and I can't help but laugh at how surreal it all feels.
The very idea that I, a fairly normal 20-something struggling to find myself in the vibrant chaos of college campus life, could end up dating one of the most adventurous spirits I know is, frankly, absurd.
My experiences had primed me for a strict adherence to what was sensible, but somehow, when laughter collided with randomness, it unlocked parts of me I hadn't even realized were closed off. Let's not forget the banana, though. In mere moments of silliness, it became an emblem of spontaneity and fun, something to be looked back on fondly rather than with embarrassment. Our mutual unorthodoxy sparked an unspoken camaraderie between us, something blossoming into laughter-filled nights where we'd recount our craziest experiences over shared ice cream sundaes, rich chocolate drizzling down the sides, rivaled only by the heaps of fruity toppings we continually consumed in jest of that first encounter. Conversations flowed easily, we shared secrets intertwined with memories, and each time he'd wink at me over the table, I felt a warmth I'd once thought reserved for fairy tales. It was during one of those late-night talks, surrounded by cushions and lingering energy from a vibrant party we'd just left, that I discovered we were both fascinated by the absurd elements of life, the little quirks we found that reminded us not to take things too seriously. He confessed that day how he recently wrestled with the idea of joining a juggling club, not because he particularly wanted to juggle, but rather because it seemed hilariously awkward and a little outlandish. We burrowed deeper into our joyfully whimsical thoughts, and who knew a casual conversation could emit so much warmth and connection. As the month neatly slipped away into a golden series of dates, I found myself growing more and more attached, not just to him but to the laughter and adventure we created together, filling up my once monotonous life with dazzling episodes of spontaneity. One particular afternoon, in an impulsive fit of creativity, I suggested we should enter a local fruit sculpture competition that promoted sustainability and art. The idea met with guffaws, and he played along. We both knew it would involve making something wild and bizarre, definitely fruit-inspired. Days later, we stood in my tiny kitchen, hands sticky with juice and laughter erupting between all the gut-busting negotiations of who would carve the watermelon into a shark and who would get the pineapple crown. We envisioned an outrageous creation that would not only make the judges scratch their heads in disbelief but also bring smiles to the faces of anyone observing our ridiculous efforts. As we cut, sculpted, and assembled our fruity tribute, I realized we weren't just creating a quirky piece, we were crafting our own little sanctuary, one laugh and mishap at a time, stamped with the ridiculousness of our adventures. The day of the competition arrived in a flurry of excitement, where we displayed our overly ambitious pineapple shark hybrid that looked more like a creature out of a cartoon than anything serious. We embraced the absurdity wholeheartedly, encouraging the giggles and whispers from passers-by instead of sympathizing with our failed artistic endeavor. The joy we felt, sharing inside jokes about our outlandish expectations, made the whole experience so rich it didn't matter that we didn't win. The connection we forged amidst the chaos and creativity became its own victory lap, one I relished deeply. Looking back on this past month, I realize what really matters isn't the moments that conform to a certain ideal but rather those that push boundaries, bend the rules, and open up new ways to see our lives unfold. Whether it's giving a silly oral salute to a banana or creating the world's most ludicrous fruit sculpture, these occurrences remind us that joy blooms in the strangest of places. This relationship, which started with a whimsical confession, has encouraged me to fully embrace the absurdities and find companionship in shared laughter, transforming my once rigid view of life into a more colorful canvas ripe with joy and adventure. And as I embarked on this journey, I realized my heart isn't just bound to the fun we've shared but also to the genuine connection forming seamlessly as we continue to explore the ridiculousness that life hands us. With each step, I can't wait to discover what new crazy moment awaits us next and how these unplanned adventures will author the next chapters of our delightfully absurd story. As the weeks rolled into a month of uncharted romance, the absurdities we chased together began to shape my world in ways I had never anticipated. Our lives became a confusing yet wonderfully vibrant tapestry woven with silly moments and heartfelt confessions. We set a peculiar rhythm to our relationship, one that was fueled by spontaneity and an appreciation for the ridiculous. Our first official date was at a quaint little fruit market that sprawled just outside the city, a hidden gem we stumbled upon while searching for fresh ingredients for an impromptu picnic. As we ambled through aisles brimming with colorful produce, I found solace in our shared jokes and the way we could burst into laughter over the oddly shaped vegetables that protruded from their boxes like playful imposters. I watched her pick up a rogue-looking radish and, with a mischievous grin, announce that it resembled a mythical creature, its earthy tones giving way to vivid storytelling. It felt surreal to be with someone who embraced these fleeting absurdities as if they were sacred, as if the bizarre moments held secrets that could weave our hearts closer together. One sunny afternoon, as we tucked ourselves into a grassy nook beneath sprawling cherry blossoms, we decided to bring our own twist to the typical picnic fare. Inspired by the playful essence of our relationship, we rummaged through our gathering of fruits, bananas, kiwi, and stubbornly ripe peaches, and came up with a silly competition. Each of us would create the most absurd fruit art we could imagine, an homage to our own quirks. I crafted a banana in the shape of a guitar, complete with toothpick strings, while she managed to create a hastily constructed fruit face that made us both chuckle uncontrollably. These moments became not just laughter shared but also silent acknowledgments of the warmth blossoming between us. While we savored the summer sun, I felt my heart flutter as we gazed at one another, the playful energy uniting us in a way that felt pure and right. But life, in its beautifully chaotic nature, also had its shadows. With the excitement, I wrestled with a gnawing fear. Was this delightful absurdity merely a phase? I had seen relationships begin with laughter only to sour when mundane realities encroached. To confront these insecurities, one night I invited her over for a cozy movie marathon. As we nestled beneath blankets, our favorite snacks laid out before us, I decided to confess that I felt a flicker of worry, that our spontaneous moments could lose their charm. Instead of recoiling from my honesty, she turned to me and smiled, her eyes gleaming with understanding. Life will have its share of mundane moments, she said, her voice soothing like a gentle breeze. But as long as we keep finding joy in the ridiculous, we'll be all right. In that moment, her reassurance calmed the storm within me. This relationship, with its quirks and spontaneous laughter, inked itself deeper into my heart, no longer merely a whimsical adventure but a genuine companionship I yearned to nurture. As the season changed, so did the fabric of our relationship. We began to integrate our silliness into everyday life. Once mundane errands became bursts of comedy as we playfully reenacted scenes from our favorite films in the aisles of the grocery store or turned waiting in lines into silly competitions of who could make the best fruit-themed puns. With each shared absurdity, the bond we formed became a buoy against the currents of normalcy. Then one evening, beneath a sky spattered with stars, we found ourselves at that same cherry blossom tree, the spot where so many of our inside jokes had been born. I looked into her eyes, their warmth reflecting the moonlight in a dance. It was the perfect moment, and both a little silly and profound. Suddenly, I pulled out a small package I had hidden in my bag. I know this sounds ridiculous, I began, feeling a warrior's heart flutter in my chest, but I wanted to ask you. She eagerly leaned closer, the anticipation etched across her face. As I unveiled a small, surreal bouquet of fruit-shaped magnets, I stammered through the laughter, "If you'd be my partner in this absurd adventure for life." Her laughter filled the air as she nodded, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. "Yes. Absolutely," she exclaimed, and in that moment, we recognized that our hearts were no longer tucked away in fearful silence but were joyfully charting an exhilarating course toward the unexpected. In the days that followed, we embraced the delightful whimsy our relationship had forged. I realized that opening myself to the ridiculous had transformed my life, urging me to cherish not only the laughter but the deep, meaningful moments shared with someone who understood the beauty of life's absurdity. As we nestled into our future together, I knew this confession wasn't just about fruit or moments of laughter, it was a celebration of the incredible joy found in embracing life as it came, each day a fresh adventure painted with the hues of love, laughter, and the delightful unknown. It all started in the early hours of a Sunday morning when my mind was too awake to return to sleep but too tired to be productive, scrolling mindlessly through my phone like so many of us do. It was during this state of semi-consciousness that I stumbled across a post on AskReddit that asked the question, "You're given 1,000,000 of whatever you last Googled. What is it?" I chuckled at the thought and, for reasons I still can't quite fathom, I clicked on the search bar and typed in Youre, which was a bizarre term I had encountered while researching local spider species for a project I was doing for a community education class. I had just finished writing about the deer that roamed the woods behind my house, but the moment I pressed search, I had no idea I would find myself entangled in something far darker than an overabundance of information about 8-legged creatures. As I waited for the results to load, a twinge of unease settled in my stomach. Imagine my surprise when, instead of an array of educational articles, I was instantly met with a blinding white light that enveloped my room, making everything else blur around me. My heart raced as I rushed to close my laptop, but it was too late. The light consumed me, and for a brief moment, I felt as if I was suspended in air, untethered and disoriented. When the luminosity faded, I blinked, staring at what can only be described as the embodiment of a nightmare, 1,000,000 tiny 8-legged black creatures crawling across every inch of my room. I stood frozen, watching as they surged toward me like a dark wave, their beady eyes glistening with a kind of malicious glee I had never witnessed before. Initially, I thought I must be dreaming, perhaps still caught in that surreal half-sleep state, but the reality turned chillingly clear when I felt the first sharp stab of pain as one of them sank its fangs into my ankle. I bolted out the bedroom door, seemingly outrunning the swarm that was now spilling out into my living room. Panic ignited deep within me as I scrambled to open the front door but couldn't help but catch a glimpse in my reflection, dark circles under my eyes, hair disheveled, a wide-eyed look of utter terror replacing the calm I usually carried. Outside, dawn was just breaking, colors swirled across the sky, yet I felt caught in a living nightmare. I needed help, but who could I call? My friends, while well-meaning, would never believe my tale. My mother had enough on her plate with my father's Alzheimer's making their lives turmoil. Just as despair began to wrap its cold fingers around my heart, the doorbell rang, echoing through the silence of the early morning. With my heart pounding, I inched towards the door, clutching a kitchen knife I had grabbed in a moment of desperation. The only person standing there was my neighbor, Evan, a quiet introvert who kept to himself mostly, but he had always seemed kind enough. "I thought I heard some commotion," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. I opened my mouth, struggling to articulate the chaos of spiders flooding my home, until I caught sight of the creeping black tide pooling around the doorway. In an instant, I closed the door and locked it, now hyper-aware of the fact that I had just isolated myself further with every panicked decision I made. I heard Evan's voice from the other side, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" I felt a lump rising in my throat, but wrestling it down, I had one coherent thought in my mind: I had to prove to him that I wasn't losing it. Grabbing my phone, I hastily Googled the word Wanarachas again, hoping perhaps for some solution, when suddenly, a staggering realization hit me: there was no information in any world that could offer clarity beyond my own experience. Nymphs of fear had rooted in my stomach. I could hear the small scratches behind the walls as they multiplied, but then it happened. I looked into the search results and found a small, unassuming forum buried deep down the page, one that whispered of old folklore connected to the word. It spoke of the daylights, creatures bound to their half-human hosts, continuing to drain the essence of those they encountered, until reaching a point of suffocating dominance. They required offerings of chaos and fear, feeding into the despair that their presence wrought. I could already feel my mind spiraling, and the anxiety reached a boiling point when I realized, in a painfully ironic twist, that the 1,000,000 spiders had come not to destroy me, but to offer me a choice. Confronting Evan at my door, I stammered out a plea for him to wait a moment while I made sense of the raging storm inside me. Could I really pull the trigger and banish them back to the ether from whence they came? Against my better judgment, I opened the door, bearing my vulnerability but not quite revealing my horrifying truth. As I explained what was happening and how I had inadvertently invited the chaos into my life, Evan listened, unjudging, offering me comfort in the uncertainty. I told him I needed help and asked if he could stay until the morning light brought me clarity, which he kindly agreed to. Slowly, as the sun began to rise and bathe the world in golden hues, I felt a gradual easing in my chest, my chaotic thoughts untangled into an understanding that sometimes, the monsters we fear are born from within us. I learned that the spiders would only thrive as long as I allowed fear to dominate me. With Evan by my side, a sense of camaraderie forming, the shadows of dread broke apart. In that peaceful light, we set to purge my home, confronting the creatures together, using our self-made concoction of vinegar and essential oils. As we battled the swarm, evoking the spirit of laughter, each one we extinguished felt like a shadow lifting from my soul. Eventually, as every final beat of darkness fell into a gentle oblivion, I found peace. A moment of reflection washed over me, revealing that while a million Youre had threatened to engulf me, they also taught me a lesson in resilience. Losing control can feel terrifying, but sometimes companionship, humor, and the fresh light of dawn can dispel even the darkest corners of one's mind. There's power in vulnerability, and amidst an avalanche of anxiety, it's often simply enough to ask for help. As the day faded into night, and I tried to catch a few hours of sleep, my phone pinged with notifications about the AskReddit post I had almost forgotten. I clicked to read the updates, half predicting someone would share their tale, mirroring my own bizarre encounter with chaos. The stories were varied, but none seemed to share the same weight. I posted my own experience, found comfort in the communion of others who turned to the thread, and embraced, though I couldn't yet articulate it, the complicated gratitude I felt for Evan, for shedding light on my darkest fears, proving, as a reminder, that we are never truly alone in the chaos that life brings. As I scrolled through the comments, each one a tapestry of lives intersecting at that very moment, I began to reflect on how Evan had unwittingly become a pivotal figure in my journey of self-discovery. I stumbled upon a comment that stood out. Someone had shared their experience of gaining 1,000,000 pounds of pancake mix after Googling best pancake recipes. While it was humorous, I couldn't help but think of the weight of my own request, 1,000,000 hearts. What I had meant as a fleeting contemplation morphed into a profound question of connection. Each heart wasn't just a physical manifestation but an emblem of the relationships I'd nurtured, the loves I'd lost, and the friendships I feared might drift away. Suddenly, the pang in my chest tightened, recollecting my best friend Claire, whose laughter had echoed in my ears just a few months prior but had faded into awkward silences since she had started dating Paul, a new boyfriend who enveloped her world like an unyielding storm. My thoughts danced as I began to wonder, would 1,000,000 hearts be enough to mend that rift? Would I return to our late-night talks over cups of tea, our laughter mingling with the soft rustle of autumn leaves? With the post still open beside me, I began typing a comment, filling it with a mixture of vulnerability and hope. I shared the way I had been feeling about Claire, the unease growing in my heart that I hadn't done enough to reach out and bridge the gap between us. I wrote about how I wished for our friendship to withstand the whirlwind of romance and uncertainty without becoming a casualty of neglect and alienation. An array of replies began to accrue, most resonating with my sentiments, speaking of their own friendships rediscovered amidst confusion and chaos. Yet there was one unexpected response from a user named Heartfelt Owl, who wrote, sometimes a simple conversation can turn things around. How about trying to reconnect? You may find that the bond is still there, waiting for you. That night, as I lay in bed, the pulsating glow of my phone illuminating my face, I felt a tug in my heart, a flicker of courage. What if I approached Claire? What if I could somehow express my feelings without the baggage of guilt or resentment that sometimes accompanied our interactions? The idea spun in my mind like a gentle whirlwind, reaching a crescendo that lulled me into sleep, accompanied by dreams of reconnection. The next morning, the air was crisp and invigorating as I stepped onto my porch, cradling a warm cup of coffee. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill tease at my skin while echoes of laughter danced at the edges of my memory. I pored over the multiple messages I had received, their encouragement intertwining with my intentions, until resolve flooded my heart. I picked up my phone, hesitating only for a moment as I typed, "Hey Claire, can we meet for coffee? I've missed you." Hit send. The weight of the world slipped off my shoulders as I embraced the warmth growing inside me, a stirring anticipation of reconnection. To my surprise, Claire replied almost immediately, her excitement palpable. We decided to meet at our favorite cafe. The day unfurled slowly, the sun weaving through the leaves as I walked to our spot. Butterflies danced in my stomach, mingled with thoughts of all I wanted to say, until I caught sight of her, standing there, beaming as though the past months had vanished in an instant. We enveloped each other in a hug, layers of unspoken words melting away, and as we sat down, it felt as though an entire universe had conspired to bring us back together. The conversation flowed seamlessly, sparking joy, laughter, and the comfort of belonging. In the weeks that followed, I felt lighter, weaving my bond with Claire into the very fabric of my life again. It was as if the 1,000,000 hearts I had envisioned manifested not as a burden but rather as a renewal of the connections I so dearly cherished. Each moment filled with appreciation became a heart of its own, the laughter shared, the weighty discussions of love and loss, the comforting silences when words weren't necessary. In reflection, I returned to that Ask Reddit post occasionally, each time encountering new comments and experiences that amazed me. I thought about the twist of fate that had led me to share my initial story, my vulnerability in a sea of confusion, proving that when we dare to open up, not only do we discover the connections we already have, but we also inspire others to explore theirs. I even came across a comment from Heartfelt Owl, who now shared updates of their own rekindled friendships, radiating similar positivity and warmth, a wonderful reminder to us all. Sometimes all it takes is a brave step forward into the unknown, because our lives are woven together in a tapestry of human connection, more intricate and beautiful than we often realize. Weeks later, I wrote a reflective update in the thread, sharing my experience, the transformation I had undergone, and how Evan's question had set off a chain reaction of connection that I never saw coming. I ended with a piece of advice: you might not understand the hearts you're asking for, but sometimes all you need is the courage to go after what you truly value. Maybe you'll find it much closer than you think. As I hit post, vivid in my mind was the image of Claire's laughter blending with the rustling leaves outside the cafe, a reminder that the chaotic threads of our lives can weave together in ways we least expect, bringing us joy and connection where we feared there would be none. As the afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across my cozy living room, my heart felt lighter, as if the burden of uncertainty had been slightly lifted. I sat on my sofa, slouched comfortably against the cushions, still pondering Claire's laugh when suddenly my phone buzzed again. Curious, I picked it up, half expecting further comments on my thread, but instead, it was a message from Evan. I hadn't heard from him since that fateful day of our strange encounter, and the rush of his name pulsed through me like a reminder of a gentle aftershock. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. I read your post. I think you really helped some people." I couldn't help but smile at his words, the warmth radiating through the screen making me feel connected to him despite the miles that separated us. "Thanks, Evan. It helped me too. Maybe we can grab that coffee we talked about?" Almost immediately, he replied, "Definitely. How about Saturday?" The memory of that awkward but enlightening day washed over me, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the random day that had somehow stitched together fragile connections in my heart. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. As I stepped into the small cafe filled with the rich aroma of espresso and the gentle chatter of people, the nervous flutter in my stomach was countered by the promise of friendship and support. I spotted Evan at a corner table, his familiar silhouette more comforting than I had anticipated. He looked up, and a wide grin broke across his face as he raised his hand in greeting. "Glad to see you made it," he said, his voice a buoy against the busyness around us. We settled into the rhythm of conversation, sharing stories of our chaotic lives, insecurities, and dreams, weaving through laughter and vulnerable confessions like threads in a tapestry. I learned more about Evan's journey. He too had been a seeker of connection, battling the same chaotic currents of modern life that often left us feeling untethered. What struck me the most was how his perspective mirrored my own, though we were both navigating our respective storms. It was a soothing realization. Our conversations flowed for hours until the sun began to dip again, painting the cafe in a soft amber glow. As we said our goodbyes, I felt a sense of closure and kinship swell inside me. On the drive home, I replayed snippets of our conversation, slow and languid. The contentment wrapped around me like a cozy blanket, providing warmth against the chill of the approaching night. I realized that this was what I had been missing, a sense of belonging, a community of souls who understood the madness of life. That weekend transformed into a recurring ritual. Every week, Evan and I would meet at the cafe. Anyone who wanted to join would spill into our circle, growing it gradually, each encounter adding more threads to our intricate tapestry. The chaos that had once felt isolating started to transform into a shared adventure. After several weeks of companionship, I found myself engaged in a deep conversation with Claire one evening, her laughter still echoing in my mind, fueling my memories. "Have you ever thought about the stories we tell ourselves?" she asked, her gaze serious yet playful. I considered her words, realizing the stories we construct are often influenced by our fears and desires, but they are also colored by who we choose to share them with. "What if," she continued, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, "the narratives we create are just reflections of who we surround ourselves with?" The thought sat heavy in my mind, blossoming into something that felt almost profound. We shared a moment of silence, letting the weight of our conversation linger in the air like the scent of freshly brewed coffee. In that moment, with the glow of the cafe surrounding us, a realization struck: the stories we've sewn together over a cup of coffee, delicate yet resilient, were allies against the chaos of uncertainty, and I understood then that we had built something truly special. Weeks later, during a particularly rainy evening, I poured myself a cup of tea and settled down to check the Ask Reddit post again. I was awash with nostalgia as I scrolled through the comments, noting how my simple story had invoked reflections and heartfelt responses from so many. Suddenly, one comment caught my eye. It was a message from a user who shared a similar experience but with a surprising twist. They had followed the same train of thought as I had, reached out to others, and eventually uncovered a hidden talent for writing. Thanks to that post, they wrote, "I've published my first short story anthology, and it's been a healing process." Chills ran down my spine as I realized how powerful our connections had become, each of us acting as stepping stones for one another, guiding those lost in their storms to discover new paths. Inspired, I spent the rest of the weekend reflecting on my own journey, contemplating how I might weave my experiences into a narrative of my own. Although the narratives we tell ourselves may be shaped by fear, the courage to reach out creates bonds that can turn chaos into something beautiful. I began to write, crafting my own story of connection, seeking to share it with all those who were still swimming through their own storms. As I penned the first words, I remembered Claire's laughter, Evan's compassionate ear, and the joy of a shared cup of coffee, realizing that our lives are a collection of stories waiting to unfold, entwined in the laughter and learning that arise from togetherness. And with each word I wrote, I could feel the lightness of connection wrapping around me, reminding me once more that even in the chaos, there is beauty, if only we dare to reach through it. The sun was dipping below the horizon as I sat on my porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands and the gentle rustle of leaves filling the quiet air. It was one of those evenings when the world felt still, a perfect backdrop for the thoughts swirling in my mind about my sister, Kathy, and her unusual fixation on her new child. She had been so ecstatic when she announced her pregnancy, and even now, weeks after little Milo's birth, the whole family was under the spell of this newborn. Everyone, it seemed, except me. As I sipped my tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, not with Milo, but with the way Kathy was treating him. The moment I stepped into her house for the first time post-delivery, I was hit with a wave of bizarrely exaggerated decor dedicated to him. Photos plastered across the walls, his name in neon lights above a crib that seemed more like a museum piece than a place for sleeping. It felt less like celebrating a life and more like a personal art installation from Kathy that demanded to reclaim the attention she had always been dependent on. I could recall something each time I visited, the wild comments rolling off her tongue, like how she believed Milo was destined for greatness, as if he were already writing the next great American novel from his crib. Wincing at such pressure woven into a life that was only just beginning, I wondered if anyone else saw the disconnection behind her infatuation. It all came to a head during this one family gathering. The air was thick with a mix of laughter and baby cooing when it slipped out, an offhand remark from me in a moment of terrible impatience. I had meant it lightly, but the words spiraled beyond my control. "Kathy, I know you love him, but I don't think a plastic doll counts as a real baby." Her face had drained of color, and the entire room went silent, eyes darting back and forth between us. I could hardly breathe, the shocking realization of what I had said crashing over me like a wave, and suddenly I was the villain in everyone's tale. Kathy's hands trembled as she held Milo close to her, a line of protectiveness flaring to life. I watched her posture close in, her expression blackening like a storm cloud. "What do you mean, a doll? He's my baby," she retorted, her voice sharp yet fragile, as if the words were made of glass. I stammered a half-hearted apology, fumbling with my thoughts in the face of her hurt. Part of me felt guilty for not taking her obsession seriously, but another part boiled with frustration. I loved her, and I wanted her to step back from this illusion, this almost delusional state she had created around motherhood, a base trust built on the genuine nurturing that true parenting demanded. Over the next couple of weeks, my life became a tangle of texts from family members asking if I was okay, trying to convince me to apologize profusely, or shaming me for my insensitive comment. Meanwhile, Kathy retreated into herself, avoiding me during family dinners, which just made the entire situation more awkward. I couldn't help but feel a swell of loneliness, like a haze settling over me. I kept fixing our broken relationship in my mind, pondering how I could ease her back to reality without jeopardizing our bond. Finally, in a moment of clarity amidst the fog of my anxieties, I sat down with a pen and paper. I wrote Kathy a letter, pouring out my heart in the way I couldn't face her directly. I told her I saw the mother in her, the love she poured into her baby, but that I worried she was losing the chance to be present in Milo's life by creating a world that felt unreal. A few days later, she responded. The letter was heartfelt, thick with emotion, but she'd woven in threads of defensiveness, describing how she felt so much pressure as a new mother to get everything right. I understood then that she wasn't just immersed in an illusion for my sake but for herself, a desperate attempt to claim identity in a role that felt immense and overwhelming. We met afterward at the park, the crisp air bringing fresh hope as I walked alongside her, both of us with our insecurities and tenderness laid bare. I promised to support her, to be there through the chaos and sleepless nights, and as we laughed at the ridiculousness of plastic dolls in the middle of our shared parental journey, I felt the aching distance begin to disappear, with the first baby steps toward reconciliation. So, was I the asshole? I asked her gently, needing to know if I had crossed a line too far. She shook her head, her lips curling upwards into a soft smile. No, just a blunt sister who cares too much. In that moment, the weight I had carried began to lift, crafting an opening through which trust and love could flow again. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, real and raw, ready to navigate this strange world of parenting together, one imperfect step at a time. A few months later, reflecting on that night, I found that Kathy had truly embraced the chaotic journey of motherhood. She had filled her home with memories instead of just decorations, and I often caught glimpses of her laughing at some mess Milo had made, remembering how quickly life can be both beautiful and exhausting. It was a reminder of the deeper roots of connection, real or metaphorical, the bond that continued to thrive despite the heated moments, rendering the word asshole a distant afterthought on our shared journey of love. As I settled into bed that evening, I took a deep breath, allowing the warmth of family and the nature of recovery to weave into my dreams, knowing that the true beauty of life lies in our imperfections. The next few days passed in a gentle blur, each moment blending into another like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. My thoughts danced between the sweet laughter of my niece and the shadows of that sharp confrontation with my sister. Sipping coffee in my small kitchen, I let my mind wander as I watched the rain streak against the window, imagining the little milestones I expected Milo to reach. And then, as if the universe cottoned to my neglect and acknowledging the unresolved feelings swirling inside me, my phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. It was a message from Claire, one of those whimsical updates she loved to send, featuring a video of Milo clutching at a stuffed giraffe while gurgling pleasantly. Despite the swirling conflict that had weighed on my heart, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of him, his innocent joy begging for love and attention. As the days rolled on, I found myself reflecting deeply about what had transpired between my sister and me. It wasn't just her intense love for Milo that prompted the conflict, it was my own feelings of disconnection and discomfort. I hadn't held a baby in years. I had no framework to understand my sister's adoration, which often felt overwhelming in its intensity. Is that why I reacted so harshly? I mused, tracing the lines of the wooden table with my fingers. It was a lesson in empathy, one that demanded from me an exploration beyond the tangible, into the depths of reason and emotion. Face to face with my own vulnerabilities, I understood that I had played the role of the contrarian, perhaps attempting to temper her unyielding praise with my rational skepticism, but in doing so, I had dismissed a fundamental part of her motherhood. Later that week, I decided it was time to extend the olive branch, realizing that this misunderstanding could easily fracture our close-knit bond if left unaddressed. I invited her for a coffee in a cozy cafe perched on the corner of our neighborhood, a spot that held joyful memories of laughter and sisterly connection. As I took a seat at the small round table, my heart fluttered with a mix of remorse and courage. Claire arrived shortly thereafter, her expression betraying a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Hey," she greeted, her eyes darting before settling on mine. A moment hung heavily between us, as if time itself was hesitating to take the next step. "Hey," I replied, motioning for her to sit. "I wanted to talk, to clear the air." She nodded, her fingers wrapping nervously around her coffee cup. The barista delivered our drinks, breaking the tension momentarily with the scent of fresh espresso and the quiet hum of cups clinking. "I feel like I hurt you when I said that thing about Milo," I began, my voice softer than anticipated as I approached the crux of our dilemma. "I shouldn't have dismissed your love for him. It's real and powerful, and it's something to be celebrated, not questioned." Her brow furrowed in contemplation. "It's just, sometimes, I feel like people don't understand," she finally admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "They think because I have a different experience of motherhood or maybe because I'm a little overprotective, it makes me less valid. I don't want you to see him like that." The air around us lightened. And I felt the walls we had built slowly begin to crumble. My heart ached for the love we shared but also for the walls we had built in moments of misunderstanding. I didn't mean to hurt you, Claire. I've been struggling to connect with that part of your life. I just didn't expect the reaction I had, I confessed, a tremor within the lines of my voice. It was almost cathartic to admit that I had been caught off guard by the power of her maternal instinct, and in that breath of honesty, a subtle understanding bloomed between us. She nodded, her once tense posture softening with each word exchanged. As we continued to talk, honesty ricocheting between our hearts, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't anticipated. Sharing our fears, our insecurities as sisters navigated in different realms of life, allowed us to embrace the authenticity of our experience. The conversation drifted toward lighter topics, both of us eventually finding bits of laughter woven back into our dialogue. And right before we parted, Claire leaned over and took my hands in hers, her laughter rolling like waves echoing the warmth we had built back. Let's schedule a weekend together at my place? I'd love for you to spend time with Milo. I think he'll really enjoy getting to know his amazing aunt. When I returned home, the weight of conflict lifted significantly. I realized I had so much to learn, yet it was wonderful to resonate with the ongoing journey toward understanding. Through my sister's eyes, through her simplest joys, I could find connections twinkling in the small moments, an invitation to a new life cradled not just in love but also in the vulnerability of letting go of what I thought and embracing the reality of what truly is. Some days are beautiful messes, and I knew I had a part to play in coloring those experiences with her, as sisters and as a family. Over the following weeks, I remained intertwined with Claire and Milo's lives more intimately, engaging in every one of their innocent moments with increasing excitement. Eventually, as I lay down each night, I allowed myself moments to reflect on how beautifully tangled our lives had become. Each layer, each moment of honesty, formed an intricate tapestry of connection woven from love, understanding, and acceptance. In those peaceful reflections, intertwined with laughter and the echo of a new understanding, I found the kind of solace I hadn't known I was searching for. The realization dawned upon me as I drifted to sleep that maybe life's imperfections and challenges could incite the most profound connections, and it was those very bonds I'd built with my sister that reminded me of the remarkable tapestry of life we all share, even, and perhaps especially, when we don't fully understand each other. The morning sun broke through the curtains with a gentle glow, nudging me awake to another day intertwined with the realities of sisterhood and the enigmatic world of parenthood. As I rose from my slumber, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, beckoning me towards the kitchen where Emma busied herself, cradling Milo with one arm while stirring a pot of oatmeal with the other. The sight was almost cinematic, a perfect blend of chaos and tenderness that defined her new life. I couldn't help but smile, but a familiar twinge of guilt laced my thoughts. The previous day's confrontation hung in the air like an uncomfortable breeze, and I knew we hadn't fully wrapped up our discussion about what it meant to be a mother in her eyes versus mine. Over breakfast, our conversation flowed effortlessly at first, light-hearted remarks exchanged amid spoonfuls of oatmeal and the sporadic gurgle of Milo. But as Emma shared her latest parenting triumphs and trials, I could feel the unsaid words lingering between us, creating an important, yet unspoken, tension. Just as the atmosphere turned fragile, I watched her face transform, suddenly reflecting the worry I had seen only moments before in her laughter. "Do you really believe Milo isn't a real baby?" she asked, her voice hanging between vulnerability and defiance. My heart sank. I had never intended to undermine her journey, but the truth I spoke felt so distant from the love she poured into him. "It's not that he isn't real," I stammered, trying to tread carefully. "It's more about how we perceive these relationships. Your love for him is immeasurable, but I worry about how these expectations affect you." Her brow furrowed, and I could see the storm of emotions brewing just behind her eyes. "You think I'm playing house?" she hissed, each word a sharp shard. I could feel the ground beneath me shifting, my own heart racing as fear knotted my stomach. It was difficult to see my sister hurt, and the distance between our perspectives only widened in that moment. "No, Emma, that's not what I meant at all." My voice softened, the urgency to mend the rift propelling me forward. "I want to celebrate your bond. I see how much you love him, but I also want to make sure you don't find yourself lost in this identity." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "How can I be lost when I spent years dreaming of moments like these? How can you think I wouldn't know what's real?" There it was, the core of her pain, the feeling of not being understood, not being seen in the half-light of doubt I had cast over her life. I felt a wave of emotion crash over me as I searched for the right words to bridge the chasm. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling the sincerity of my apology wash over my words. "I'm afraid of what happens when the novelty fades and how it might feel to confront the reality of parenting. I just want to make sure you're okay." Her silence spoke volumes, a mixture of resentment, understanding, and perhaps a trace of compassion for my misplaced fear. We remained suspended in that moment until slowly, like the dawn creeping through the night, she exhaled deeply. I appreciate your concern, but I wish you could trust me more. I'm deep in this, and it's beautiful, even if it's messy. Those words etched themselves on my heart, each syllable a reminder of the need for trust amidst uncertainty. With that, the tension began melting away as if the morning sunlight was burning through our darkness. We spent the rest of the day navigating shared moments together, plays with Milo transforming into laughter-filled bursts of joy, the kind only siblings can ignite in each other. As the hours passed, with each silly face made and every coup exchanged, I let go of the need to be right and allowed space for Emma to lead. When evening fell, and the amber dusk settled lazily outside the windows, we curled onto the couch, each cradling Milo, their hearts synchronized in a new rhythm of understanding. I held my breath as she began to sing softly, tapping into that innate bond that tied us together, unearthing things that transcended mere words. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, reassuring me that the journey we were on was uniquely ours, regardless of how we perceived it. I realized that love exists in its many forms, and in order to embrace that love, we didn't have to understand every facet of it, we simply had to accept it. That night, as I drifted into sleep once more, I felt a deep sense of peace, a profound connection to my sister fortified by our shared vulnerabilities. The beauty of our imperfect lives felt both heavy and light, reminding me that we carry each other as we navigate through the complexities of love and identity. My heart swelled at the thought of the many future moments we would continue to craft together against the backdrop of life's ever-changing tapestry. Although I hadn't found all the answers, I took comfort in knowing that I was never alone on this journey, and perhaps that was what mattered most.